Hey, hi there, and welcome back to another episode of Sit and Spin with me, your host, Joe Royland. First off, I just want to say thanks to the band The Size, who were last week's featured subject, and their fans for all the people who shared the show and commented and made it a rousing success. Always happy to turn people onto that band because they're such a great band, and I'm glad to be able to do that. Secondly, you might see something in the show you rarely ever see, which is cuts. I prefer to do my show one live track all at one time. I'm going to try to do that today, but it's been a long, stressful weekend. I'm really late now and I'm exhausted, but I just want to get the show out. So you might see cuts today. We'll see. We don't know yet. But if they're there, they're there. Now, today, last week, we were talking about how this week's artist was kind of similar to last week's in that this is some unreleased material that's finally been released. And if you saw the tease pictures I put up on the website, maybe you knew who those people were, maybe you don't. If you are a KISS fan, you probably recognize that one of them was Vinnie Vincent, one-time guitarist for the band. The other three guys in the band were formerly members of the band New England, which is one of my favorite bands of all time. And together, they formed a band that was called Warrior, was the working name for the band. And basically we're going to give you like some history on all of those groups and talk about this new release, Warrior, featuring Vinnie Vincent, Gary Shea, Jimmy Waldo, and Hirsh Gardner, which was just released on CD about a month ago, even though it took Amazon about a month to get it to me, and I just finally got it this week. But first, some history. New England was a band formed in Boston, Massachusetts, comprised of guitarist vocalist John Fannin, bassist Gary Shea, drummer vocalist Hirsh Gardner, and keyboardist Jimmy Waldo, all guys I've been able to befriend online over the years. These guys, and particularly their debut album, which was released in 1979, self-titled, is one of my favorite albums of all the time from anybody. Band is just a group I love. Their music is kind of hard to describe in a way. Think of it as classic rock from some of the other like bands named after places like Boston or Journey. There's elements of that type of music into it. There's like the great vocal harmonies and melodies of the Beatles and the English invasion bands, British invasion bands from that time period, as well as some of the pomp of like ELO or even progressive rock bands, and even a little bit of new wave in some of their music at times. It's a little bit of everything, but it was a great mix of stuff. Their debut record featured the hit single Don't Ever Want to Lose You, which was a top 40 hit. The record was co-produced by Mike Stone and Paul Stanley of the group KISS, as they shared the same manager in Bill Aucoin, which also got them an opening slot on KISS's Dynasty Tour in 1979, which also happened to be my very first ever concert, was seeing New England open for KISS on the Dynasty Tour. The original album was out on Infinity Records, but unfortunately the label folded not too long after the album came out, which left them searching for a new label. They found a new home in Elektra Records and released their follow-up album, Explorer Suite, in 1980, which was again co-produced by Mike Stone with, this time, John Fannin of the band. It was another great record. Unfortunately, it went a little unnoticed, even though it's full of great songs. And for their next release in 1981, Walking Wild, the band worked with noted producer and noted musician Todd Rundgren. If you don't know that name, you should. And again, it was another great record that unfortunately got pretty much overlooked, aside from the song DDT, which was a minor hit, or at least got a lot of airplay in the New England area. Now, the band were set to work on their fourth album. They were getting ready, they were demoing songs, and in the midst of that, all of a sudden, just rather unexpectedly, John Fannin decides he wants to quit the group. He's tired of being in the band, doesn't want to be in the band anymore, and this left Gary Shea, Hirsh Gardner, and Jimmy Waldo, who wanted to stay together as a band, all of a sudden needing a new singer and guitarist. So they put the word out with all these companies, hey, if you guys know anybody, if you know a singer guitarist, get back to us, let us know. And within a week of each other, the group received calls from noted record guy and producer and songwriter Len Pizzi, as well as Gene Simmons himself from KISS, who both referred a guy of the same name, a guy named Vincent Cusano. At this time, that was his given name and the name he was going by. And Vinnie had been working with KISS on their upcoming album called Creatures of the Night. And even though Ace Frehley is pictured and credited on the album as being a guitarist, he doesn't play a single note on the record at all. It was just kind of meant to further the KISS image at the time. Vinnie actually co-wrote some of the songs on the album, played guitar in about half the songs on the album. Some of the other guitarists featured on the album were Steve Ferris, who later go on to play with Mr. Robin Ford plays on the record, as well as a couple of other people who were potentially in the running to replace Ace Frehley as a guitarist along with Vinnie. Now, Vinnie had come up through the music scene originally as a member of Felix Cavalieri of the Young Rascals band. He had a group called Treasure in 1977. He appeared on that record. And then he got a job as staff songwriter on Happy Days and its spin-off show Joni Loves Chachi. This later led to work with singer-musician Dan Hartman, who you may remember from Edgar Winter's group. Remember the song Free Ride? That's Dan Hartman who sang and co-wrote that tune. He worked on Dan's solo album Instant Replay, the title track of which was a big hit in the late 70s. And eventually, through a friendship with songwriter Adam Mitchell, who was a guy who had done writing with KISS before, he got an introduction to the group as a possible replacement for Ace Frehley and somebody else who could write with him. And as Ace was leaving the band. Now, the group they dug Vinnie. They liked him as a songwriter. They thought he was a good guitar player. But first they were kind of unsure about using him, especially due to his height or lack thereof. They kind of thought he was too short to be in KISS. And hence how he kind of got referred to New England as a possible new member to replace John Fanning. So the guys from New England called Vinnie up, said, hey, you've been recommended to us. We'd like to hear what you got. Vinnie said, cool, I'll send you a demo tape. He sent them out a 5-song demo of tunes he had written. And when the New England guys heard it, they were duly impressed that they said, hey, come on out to Boston and jam with us. And then they impressed Vinnie by having learned all the songs on his demo so that when he got there, they already knew how to play them. Vinnie was impressed by that. The jam went so well that the two parties agreed that they should work together. And at this point, everything seemed to be going pretty groovy, but there was a couple small hiccups already at this point. For one, Vinnie wasn't really a fan of New England's material and had no intention of just becoming the new member of New England and continuing on that route. He kind of wanted to forge his own path, and he encouraged the other members of the New England to move out to LA with him and start a new band playing his material instead. And as those guys liked the material so much, they agreed to do it, so they moved out to LA. Now the second thing was, while the New England guys thought that Vinnie had a fine voice, and he is a really good vocalist in his own right, Vinnie himself didn't want to be the singer in the band. Instead, he wanted to focus on his guitar work, and he wanted a singer with kind of like a higher voice, something he's always liked. And because of this, the band ended up doing some demo work with the late singer Fergie Fredrickson, who was formerly of the bands Trillion and LaRue, and would later join Toto after following his work working on the Warrior Project. Now, those live studio takes we're going to get to in a moment that they did with Fergie. And Fergie they liked because or especially Vinnie liked, because he possessed the type of voice that Vinnie was a fan of, with a really high vocal range that would also later be found in some of the other singers Vinnie worked with, such as Robert Fleischman and Mark Slaughter on his next solo project, which was the Vinnie Vincent Invasion. So the guys spent about 3 months working together on material, and even got the interest of CBS Records, who agreed to finance recording demos at the record plant studio with an option to pick up the band. And things were looking really good at this point. But just as suddenly, KISS all of a sudden threw a spanner in the works and offered Vinnie an offer he couldn't refuse, and basically said, hey, we want you to join the band as Ace Frehley's replacement, which he did, pretty much putting an end to the Warrior Project. Vinnie went on to tour for the Creatures of the Night album, adopting the Unk Warrior makeup, replacing Ace Frehley of the band in his makeup as the Spaceman, and then also worked on the band's follow-up album, record Lick It Up from 1983, where he co-wrote most of the songs, plays pretty much all the lead guitar on it, except for one of the tracks is Rick Derringer. And this was a big album for KISS. This was, the band's fortunes had been waning, and this was the album they famously took off their iconic makeup in the early 80s on MTV, and this was a big comeback record for KISS, and had many hits off it, such as the title track, All Hell's Breaking Loose, Million to One. So this was a big comeback record for KISS, and Vinnie kind of took a lot of the credit for that because he was co-writing the songs, and rightfully so. But the band had been trying to get him to sign a contract where they basically wanted him to be like a hired member of the band and not an equal partner. Vinnie felt he should be more of an equal partner in the band and refused to sign the contract, and the two parties couldn't come to terms together, and thus Vinnie was sent packing. As much as they liked his stuff, and there were ego problems and other issues that were happening with the band. So Vinnie's time in the band was short-lived. It was pretty much only for the one album, and then he went to work on his next project. Now, the New England guys, Hirsh Gardner ended up moving back to Boston, where he wanted to work on his own music, as well as became a producer for other bands. He produced a band called Mass from Massachusetts, if you might remember them. And he would later work with Vinnie again for a very short period of time, which was kind of like the demo stuff for early versions of Vinnie Vincent Invasion stuff. Now, there's a whole lot of story to that. I'm going to get to that again at the end of the episode. But back to this story. Gary Shea and Jimmy Waldo decided that they were going to stay in LA, where they co-founded the band Alcatraz with legendary singer Graham Bonnet, who used to sing with Rainbow, amongst other bands, Michael Schenker Group. And first, they had guitarist Yngwie Malmsteen, who was later replaced by Steve Vai, and then Danny Johnson for the third record. And that's what happened with those guys for that time being. Now, Vinnie then went and started the Vinnie Vincent Invasion. Their debut album came out in 1986, and it's followed with Robert Fleischman as the lead singer, Dana Strum as the bass player, and Bobby Rock as the drummer. And its follow-up album, actually showed the wrong record there. This is the follow-up album, which was All Systems Go, released in 1988, and Robert Fleischman was out, and Mark Slaughter was brought in as the lead singer. See, I'm getting confused already, but at least I haven't done a cut yet. Both these records were really decent, and some of the songs that were originally used for the Warrior tracks ended up showing up on the Vinnie Vincent debut. So, as for this release, the Warrior material here is circulated for years in kind of bootleg format, not great sound and quality, but now has finally been released on this CD by Cherry Red Records out of the UK. And sound quality wise, straight up gonna tell you, it's not state-of-the-art top-notch. It's untouched, unpolished, from Gary Shea's own personal collection of work tapes for the band, his copies of them, and as such it does show sonic flaws to the original source material but even that said, it's still way better than previously versions that have been out there bootleg wise, and offers a really fascinating glimpse into what could have been. The CD itself is kind of split up into three parts. The first part is the original 6-song demos that were recorded at the record plant, and include the tracks Boys Gonna Rock, boys spelled with an S, and this track would later be redone as Boys with a Z Are Gonna Rock on the Vinnie Vincent Invasion album, with Robert Fleischman singing, with the choruses and like kind of the main riff of the song intact, but the verse lines got used for the song on the 8th day on KISS's Lick It Up album, so all new verses were written for the song. The next track, It's Not Pretty Being Easy, remains a Warrior-only track. It was not, I know of, never used for anything else, as was the song Gypsy in Her Eyes, which is a mid-tempo rocker. It also showed a lot of promise, but I don't think that ever ended up being on anything else either. The next song, which is the track you're hearing right now, Back on the Streets, is probably, or Back on the Street as it was called here, it's probably perhaps the most well-known song from these demos, as it would also be redone for the first Vinnie Vincent Invasion album as Back on the Streets, extra S added at the end, and was also demoed, although not released, by KISS with Paul Stanley singing it. Ace Frehley solo as part of his Frehley's Comet years, I think there are versions of both him singing vocals on it and Richie Scarlett, guitarist, singing vocals on that album. And ex-Europe guitarist John Norum and Swedish singer Jay Miles also did release versions of the song down the road. The fifth track on the album, I Need Love, would be reworked as Shoot You Full of Love on the Vinnie Vincent Invasion album, quite differently, as well as the song Baby Oh Why, which would also be reworked as just Baby Oh on the Vinnie Vincent Invasion album, again in a very different format. And that's the first 6 tracks on the disc. The next part of the album is live rehearsal instrumentals of some of the previous tracks, such as Baby Oh Why, Back on the Streets, and I Need Love, as well as the cuts Betrayed and Hot Nights. And this show is like the band working out the songs, just like playing them live in the studio. And there's definitely an energy and a passion coming from Gary Shea and Hirsh Gardner and Jimmy Waldo and Vinnie Vincent that shows why they were so excited about this project to begin with. Like this less polished, but a lot more energy than the studio recordings for some of these tracks. So that's kind of cool to hear those versions there. And then the third and final part of the disc is the previously mentioned live rehearsals that feature Fergie Frederiksen singing tracks. And he does versions of Back on the Streets, Gypsy in Her Eyes, Baby Oh Why, Hot Nights, and I Need Love. And again, this gives kind of another alternate version of what could have been with a different singer singing stuff, and also get some insight to what it's like to what it's like to be working, doing demo versions of these songs in that manner. You know, you can kind of hear them working up the songs, trying them out a little bit differently, which is kind of cool. But it's, all in all, it's a really cool disc, and if you're a fan of any of these bands, just helps kind of fill out a missing link in the connection that you may have had for all these bands. Like I said, I'm a big New England fan. If you are too, you might want to own this to hear this. If you're a Vinnie Vincent fan, you probably definitely want to own this to hear that stuff and have it in the best version that's been released of it so far. And again, if you're a KISS fan, you might want it for that same reason. Now, what's become of these people since? New England. They ended up reuniting for some shows in 2010 with John Fannin, original member John Fannin, and again in 2013. They released the Live at the Regent Reunion CD last year, which you can get through the band's website. Post a link to that in the show notes as well. And they are currently out doing some live dates around the country and around the world. They just did some shows in Japan. They just played in Boston last week. Massachusetts just missed them again. Just bumming me out, but I just have not been able to work out seeing them do a reunion show. Sorry guys, one of these days. Gary and Jimmy have also been doing some live dates with the Graham Bonnet Band, kind of doing a mini Alcatraz show. Those have been out there. Gary also has the Cooper Shea Project albums out there, which you can get via his site. And Hirsh Gardner himself just released a brand new solo album, My Brain Needs a Holiday. Mine does as well, Hirsh. Which you can also get via the links to his website, which I will include in the show notes as well. Now, New England also possibly working on some new music. They did release a new 7-inch single back in 2013, which you can get through their website as well. Hopefully, possibly, maybe some new studio music from them. Would be awesome if they did. As for Vinnie, God, that is a long story into itself. Vinnie just kind of sank into this maddening, spiraling out of controlness, lots of lawsuits, lots of craziness, and you can find out more about that from some links I'm going to give you in a minute. But basically, Vinnie has not been heard from for years, but he is set to be the featured guest at this year's Atlanta KISS Expo 2018 in January of next year. Now, whether or not he shows up, that's going to be another story. I really hope he does, because I want to find out what he's up to now, what has been happening with him, as do a lot of other KISS fans. Now, I would be remiss not to tell you about our friends over at the Decibel Geek podcast, Aaron Camaro and Chris Sinzak, who have done great interviews with Hirsh Gardner and Gary Shea, as well as our friend John Laramo of the Hustle podcast, who we mentioned last week, who has also done interviews with Hirsh Gardner as well. So please check out those guys' sites to hear some great insight from Hirsh and Gary on their shows, as well as you can always get some cool Vinnie Vincent information over at the Decibel Geek podcast too. So that's our show, the Warrior CD, now out. Warrior featuring Vinnie Vincent, Gary Shea, Hirsh Gardner, and Jimmy Waldo. Out now. Definitely pick it up if you, like I said, if you're a fan of any of these bands, if you has any interest at all to you. It's a cool, long lost thing. Look into what could have been, what might have been, and nice missing piece of the puzzle to finally have. And that's our show for this week. It's been a long one. Thanks for tuning in. What do you know? No breaks at all. We will catch you next time on Spit and Spin. We'll hopefully have some new music for you. Not sure which one it's going to be, or either that or it's going to be another classic reissue. We will see. We'll see. But tune in then to find out what it is, and thanks for tuning in now. If you like this show, hit the like button, share it with friends, let them know about it too, and I will catch you next time on Sit and Spin. See you then.